Hey there, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I want to talk about something that almost every writer struggles with, especially early on, and that is how to know if your idea is good enough to commit to. Not good enough to publish, not good enough to win awards, just good enough to spend months or even years of your life writing. This came up briefly in a previous video, but today I want to try and really focus on it because, as I've mentioned before, a lot of writers don't give up because they lack talent, but rather because they don't trust their ideas. They might even be waiting for the right idea, the perfect idea, the idea that feels undeniable. But that moment where you feel like you've got the idea for a bestseller, it usually never comes. And if it does, it's often followed by doubt. So let's start by clearing something up. There is no such thing as an objectively good enough idea. Ideas don't come pre-validated. They don't arrive stamped with certainty or with the guarantee that pursuing them will make your debut novel an overnight sensation. In fact, they don't necessarily feel all that impressive at the beginning. Most of the time, they feel small and vague, like a tiny spark without the kindling required to build a fire. Here's the thing, though. Almost every finished novel started as an idea that felt incomplete. You see, what makes an idea good is not how it feels at the start. It's whether you can develop it into a strong story. So instead of asking, is this idea good enough? I want you to start asking 3 different questions, starting with, does this idea hold your attention? Not excite you for one afternoon, not grab your interest for just 5 minutes. I mean, is it persistent? Do you find yourself thinking about it while doing other things? Does it resurface when you're tired or bored or trying to think about something else? Because a good enough idea will linger. It will demand your attention. So if an idea keeps returning and you can't seem to forget about it, then it's probably worth pursuing. The next question to ask is whether or not there's pressure in the idea. You see, pressure is what turns an idea into a story. In other words, you need to have a character who wants something, an obstacle that prevents them from getting what they want, and a cost to the character if they don't get what they want. For example, imagine Cinderella without the midnight deadline, where she risks her ball gown being turned back into rags or the carriage back into a pumpkin. Without that pressure, there are no high stakes. Cinderella's meeting with the prince would carry no risk of discovery. There would be no need for haste on her part to hurry home as she does, an incident that leads to her losing her glass slipper, which ultimately allows the prince to find her after another pressure-filled will he, won't he moment where other ladies try on the shoe and where poor Cinderella almost goes unnoticed. The lesson here is that putting pressure on your characters matters. If your idea contains tension, whether it be emotional, moral, or relationship-driven, then you have something to work with. If your idea doesn't have this yet, then that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad idea. It just means it isn't finished yet as a premise. Now, a lot of writers abandon ideas too early because they expect pressure to be obvious from the start. But pressure is often something you create, not something that's automatically there. Finally, you should ask yourself if your idea can change your character. Will it allow for character growth? Because if you can imagine how this story might force someone to confront something difficult, to make choices they rather avoid, or become someone slightly different by the end of the story, then the idea is already in great shape. Now, I want you to notice what we didn't ask. We didn't ask if the idea was original. We didn't ask if it was marketable or if someone else has done it before. Those questions can come later. For now, the important part is figuring out if your idea can find traction. Here's something I wish I'd learned sooner. You don't find good ideas by evaluating them. You find them by working on them. And if you're unsure about your ideas, it doesn't mean you lack instinct. It usually means you're trying to skip the work because you think coming up with the right idea should be easy. But a lot of the time, it isn't. A lot of the time, ideas need tweaking. That can still mean that your starting point has potential, just that it lacks one of the elements mentioned before. So if you're sitting on an idea right now and wondering whether it's worth writing, here's my answer. If it holds your attention, contains pressure, and has the potential to change someone, it's good enough to begin. But if you're lacking one of these things, then you have a choice to make. Either work on improving the idea or come up with a different idea altogether. One that does hold your attention, does contain pressure, and has the potential for character growth. Because ultimately, this is the kind of idea that will not only help you start writing, it's also the kind of idea that's likely to keep your momentum going long enough for you to finish your novel. Before we wrap up, I would love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below if you're currently stuck deciding whether an idea is good enough, or have you abandoned an idea in the past that you now wish you'd explored a little longer? If you found this helpful and you'd like more practical writing advice like this, you can subscribe to the channel for weekly videos about plotting, characters, story structure, and the mindset it takes to finish a novel. And finally, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.